My son secretly created a YouTube-style loyalty test for my new wife and her daughter, and I never imagined the real betrayal would come from him. At 61, I thought I had finally found happiness again after losing my first wife, but my son believed my new family was only after my money. He hired a crew, staged a trap, and waited for them to fail. But when the cameras captured the truth, my wife and her daughter proved their loyalty while my son's darkest secrets began to surface. Before we go any further, I am so grateful you are here. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? Your city, your state, your country. I want to know. Welcome to Revenge Dad, and I am glad you found this channel. This story contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to actual names or places is coincidental, but everything this story is trying to tell you is worth hearing. My name is Walter Hayes, and I have spent 35 years making sure other people's electricity worked perfectly. I crawled through attics in the middle of August, traced dead circuits in buildings that smelled like mold and old paint, and stood on rooftops in the Pasadena wind with nothing but a tool belt and a thermos of bad coffee. I knew how to find a fault in a system that looked fine on the outside. I knew how to follow a wire back to its source, even when the path twisted through walls and ceilings, and places no one ever bothered to look. 35 years of that work taught me one thing above everything else. When something is wrong, you do not guess. You trace it carefully. You take your time, and you do not touch the wrong wire. I retired in the spring, and by September of that same year, I had married Evelyn Carter at a small ceremony inside St. Andrew Catholic Church on Mariposa Avenue, 3 blocks from the house I had owned since 1987. There were no balloons. There was no band. Ray Pittman, my oldest friend, and the man who had worked beside me on more job sites than I could count, sat in the front pew in a shirt he had ironed himself and looked like he might cry before I did. Evelyn's daughter, Samantha, stood near the altar holding a small bouquet of white roses, and when the priest asked if we were ready, she gave her mother a look that was so full of warmth it made my chest ache in the best possible way. It was the second time in my life I had stood at that kind of altar. The first time I had been 26 years old, and the woman beside me was Linda. Linda Hayes passed in the spring of 2019 after a fight with cancer that lasted 14 months and took everything she had. She was the kind of woman who apologized to the nurses when they had to draw her blood. She kept a small notepad on her nightstand and wrote down the names of every person who visited, because she said she never wanted to forget a kindness. When she was gone, the house on Mariposa Street went quiet in a way I had not been prepared for. Not just quiet like no television, no voices. Quiet like the air itself had changed its weight. I lived in that quiet for 5 years. Brandon called every few weeks from New York, where he had built himself a life and a career that I was still trying to fully understand. He sent Christmas cards and asked about my health, and sometimes stopped by during the holidays with a bottle of wine and a handshake that had replaced the hugs he used to give me when he was small. I told myself it was normal. Boys grow up, they get busy, they move to Manhattan and become whoever they decide to become. I met Evelyn in July of 2023 at a community volunteer day organized by the Pasadena Unified School District. We were repainting the exterior walls of Jefferson Elementary School, and she was holding her roller brush at entirely the wrong angle, dragging paint down instead of rolling it out, leaving thick drips along the baseboard that would harden into bumps by morning. I walked over and said, "If you hold it that way, you're going to be here until Thanksgiving." She looked at me with the kind of expression that meant she was deciding whether to be annoyed or amused. She chose amused, which told me something important about her right away. "Then show me the right way," she said. I showed her. We painted that section of wall together for the next 2 hours, and somewhere in the middle of it, we stopped talking about painting. Her name was Evelyn Carter. She had taught 3rd grade for 22 years before her knees told her it was time to stop standing on hard floors all day. She had a daughter named Samantha, who was finishing her master's degree in graphic design at Cal Poly Pomona. She had lost her husband 7 years earlier to a heart attack that came without warning on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. She told me that part of her story, the way people do when they have told it enough times that the words no longer cut them the same way, but their hands still move differently when they say it. I understood that completely. We had coffee the following Saturday, then dinner the week after that. Then 14 months of learning each other in the slow, careful way that people our age tend to do, because we both knew what it cost to lose someone. you had built your whole life around, and neither of us was in a hurry to be careless with another person's heart. She never once asked about the house, or what I had saved, or what retirement looked like for an electrician from Pasadena. She asked about Linda because she was not threatened by the past. She asked about Brandon because she genuinely wanted to know the shape of my life. She laughed at things that were actually funny, and did not pretend to laugh at things that were not. On the morning of our wedding, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my good suit and told Linda's photograph on the dresser that I thought she would have liked Evelyn. I believed that was true. Ray shook my hand outside the church and said, "You look terrified." "I'm not terrified," I told him. "I'm just very aware of what this means." He nodded once slowly. "That's exactly what terrified looks like on you, Walter." The ceremony was brief and honest. Evelyn wore a dress the color of cream, and when she took my hand at the altar, her grip was steady and warm and certain in a way that made my throat tighten, with something I could not have named out loud without embarrassing myself in front of the priest. Samantha wiped her eyes during the vows, and then immediately laughed at herself for doing it. Ray did not cry, but it was close. Brandon did not come. He had known about the wedding for 3 months. I had called him myself in June and told him the date and the time and the address of the church. He had said he would try to make it work. Then August came and he said things were complicated with his filming schedule. Then September arrived, and on the morning of the ceremony, my phone showed one text from my son, sent at 7:42 in the morning. "Congratulations, I guess. Hope you know what you're doing." I read it twice, standing in the church parking lot in my good suit, with Ray waiting by the door and Evelyn inside, arranging white roses with Samantha. My chest tightened so hard I had to press one hand flat against my sternum and breathe through it. Not from anger, something worse than anger. The kind of hurt that comes from hoping for something right up until the moment you understand it is not coming. I put the phone in my jacket pocket. I walked through the door of St. Andrew Catholic Church, and I married Evelyn Carter on a Thursday afternoon in September, with the California sun coming through the stained glass windows, and Ray Pittman blinking too fast in the front pew. Whatever was waiting on the other side of that text message, I would deal with it later. But I want you to understand something before I tell you what came next. I was not naive. 35 years of tracing wires through dark walls had taught me to notice when something was running underneath the surface. I had felt it in Brandon's silences, and in the way he looked at Evelyn's name when it appeared on my phone. I had felt it in the careful flatness of his voice whenever I mentioned her. I had spent my whole career learning how to find the fault before it caused the fire. I just did not know yet how close the fire already was. Evelyn made pot roast for the welcome dinner. She had been in the kitchen since 10 in the morning, and by the time I came downstairs at noon, the whole house smelled like rosemary and slow-cooked beef, and something that felt for the first time in a long time like a home that had a woman in it again. She was wearing the blue apron Samantha had given her for her birthday, and when I walked in, she handed me a spoon and said, "Tell me if it needs more salt." It did not need more salt. It was perfect. I told her it was perfect. She gave me a look that said she already knew. Samantha arrived at 4 in the afternoon with a bottle of sparkling water and a small plant in a terracotta pot. She set the plant on the kitchen windowsill, stepped back, looked at it, and said, "It's a peace lily. I figured the house could use one." Then she laughed at her own joke, and Evelyn shook her head but could not hide the smile. Brandon arrived at exactly 6 o'clock. Not 5:58, not 6:02, 6 o'clock on the dot, as though he had been sitting in his rental car at the end of the driveway, watching the clock on his dashboard, waiting for the precise moment that would make him appear punctual without appearing eager. I opened the front door, and there he was, my son, 34 years old, standing on the porch of the house he had grown up in, wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my first month's salary as an apprentice electrician. He had his mother's eyes in my jaw and a smile that I had once thought was the warmest thing in the world. That evening, watching him, I began to understand that a smile is just a muscle movement. It does not always mean what it looks like. "Dad." He pulled me into a hug that lasted exactly the right number of seconds. "Brandon." I held on a beat longer than he expected. I felt him adjust. He stepped inside and looked around the living room, the way a building inspector looks at a structure he has been asked to evaluate. His eyes moved from the new curtains Evelyn had hung to the wedding photograph on the side table to the arrangement of candles on the mantel that had not been there when Linda was alive. His jaw stayed relaxed. His expression stayed pleasant. But his eyes did not stop moving. "Evelyn." He turned to her with the smile fully engaged. "It's great to finally meet you. Dad has told me so much." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and took his hand warmly. He's told me a lot about you too, Brandon. I'm glad you came. Of course, he said. Wouldn't miss it. He had missed the wedding. He did not acknowledge that fact, and I did not bring it up, because I had decided before he arrived that this evening would not begin with a wound. We sat down to dinner at 6:30. The pot roast was everything Evelyn had promised. Samantha served herself twice and told Evelyn it was the best thing she had eaten since Christmas. I poured water for everyone, and for a few minutes it felt almost easy, almost like what it was supposed to be. A family dinner, nothing more. Then Brandon set down his fork and said, "So, Evelyn, what did you do before you retired?" Dad mentioned teaching, but he wasn't very specific. "Third grade," Evelyn said, smiling. 22 years, Jefferson Elementary right here in Pasadena. "That's wonderful." He nodded slowly the way people nod when they're filing information rather than responding to it. "And your daughter Samantha, right? She's still in school." "Finishing her master's?" Samantha said pleasantly. "Graphic design." "Great field." He looked back at Evelyn. "And your late husband, was he in education as well?" The question landed just slightly wrong. Not wrong enough to object to, just wrong enough to feel like a probe rather than a conversation. Evelyn answered without flinching. "He was an accountant, small firm in Glendale. He passed 7 years ago." "I'm sorry to hear that." Brandon's voice carried exactly the right tone of sympathy. "It must have been hard managing everything on your own after that." "People manage," Evelyn said simply. "You learn what you're made of." Brandon smiled again. Then he turned to me. "Dad, I was thinking, have you updated your estate paperwork since the wedding? I know you mentioned wanting to get things sorted after you retired." The question hit me somewhere between my ribs. My fork stopped moving. "We're handling it," I said, and I kept my voice even, because I had made a decision before he walked through that door, and the decision was to watch rather than react. "Frank Okafor is helping us get everything in order." Of course, of course." Brandon lifted his glass. "Just want to make sure you're protected, Dad. That's all." Samantha reached across the table and refilled Evelyn's water glass without being asked. It was a small gesture, but I saw Evelyn's shoulders drop just slightly with gratitude. After dinner, Brandon offered to help clear the table. He carried 2 plates to the kitchen, and then I heard his footsteps go the wrong direction. Not back toward the dining room, but toward the hallway, toward the short corridor that led past the guest room and the small study I had used for paperwork since 1991. I excused myself from the table. Samantha caught my eye as I stood. Her expression was careful, controlled, but her jaw was tight in the way that told me she was working to keep something off her face. She leaned toward me just slightly and dropped her voice below the sound of Evelyn gathering the serving dishes. "Walter?" she said quietly but firmly, her eyes cutting toward the hallway. He had his phone out when he was standing by the bookshelf. I saw the screen. He was taking pictures. The words landed in my chest like a cold hand pressing flat against my sternum. I kept my face neutral. I nodded once very slightly so that only Samantha could see it. Then I walked into the living room. Later, I would notice that Samantha's Instagram had been set to public since August, and that 3 of her recent posts showed Evelyn at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, tagged by location, time stamped on Saturday mornings. Brandon was standing beside the bookshelf near the front window, his hands in his jacket pockets. Now, his posture relaxed and easy. He had positioned himself so that the wedding photograph on the side table was just over his left shoulder. "Great picture," he said when he heard me come in. He nodded at the photograph without looking at it directly. "You both look happy." "We are," I said. He turned and looked at me for a moment with an expression I could not fully read. Then he smiled that same, practiced, perfectly calibrated smile and said, "Good. That's what matters, right?" At 8:45, Brandon said he needed to get some rest before his flight the next day. He shook my hand. At the door told Evelyn the pot roast was excellent, told Samantha it had been great to meet her, and went upstairs to the guest room. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened to his footsteps cross the floor above me. My hands were steady, my breathing was steady, but something behind my eyes was working very hard and very fast, the way it used to work when I was tracing a circuit that looked clean, but kept blowing the breaker over and over without any obvious cause. Something was running underneath this, something I could not yet see, but I had learned a long time ago that the fault always leaves a trace. 3 days after the welcome dinner, I sat down in front of my laptop at 11 o'clock at night and typed my son's name into the YouTube search bar. I had been putting it off. Not because I was afraid of what I would find, but because there is a particular kind of reluctance that comes with looking at your own child through the eyes of a stranger. Brandon was my son. I had taught him to ride a bike in the driveway of this house. I had driven him to his first job interview and waited in the parking lot with the engine running in case he needed to leave quickly. Whatever he had built for himself in New York, I had always looked at it through the filter of knowing him first as a boy who used to fall asleep on the couch with his shoes still on. That night I removed the filter. His channel was called Truth Lens, and it had 892,000 subscribers. The banner image at the top was a close-up of an eye, the pupil replaced by a camera lens. The tagline underneath read, "No scripts, no filters, just the truth." I clicked on the most recent video, then the one before that, then 3 more after that, working backward through his uploads like a man reading a document from the last page to the first, trying to understand the conclusion before he understood how it was reached. What I saw made my stomach turn in a slow, grinding way that I had not felt in a long time. Brandon's content was built around a single idea that the people closest to you were hiding something, and that it was his job to find out what. He set up situations. He hired people to play roles. He placed cameras in positions his subjects would never think to look. And then he filmed whatever happened and presented it to nearly 1 million people as revelation. In one video, he had arranged for a man to approach his friend's girlfriend at a coffee shop with a fabricated story about knowing her from college, waiting to see if she would go along with the lie. She had not. She had corrected the man politely and walked away. Brandon had titled the video, "She Passed But Watch Her Face" at the 2-minute mark, the implication being that even her innocence was suspicious if you looked at it the right way. In another video, he had tested his own roommate by leaving cash visible on the kitchen counter and pretending to leave the apartment, then filming through a gap in the doorway. The roommate had picked up the cash, counted it, and put it back down without taking any. Brandon had titled that one, "Almost," as though the roommate's honesty was somehow a near miss rather than just honesty. I pressed my knuckles against my mouth and kept watching. The comments underneath each video were full of people who had decided, based on 3 minutes of edited footage, that they understood the complete character of a person they had never met. They used words like sketchy and sus and red flag with total confidence. Brandon would reply to some of them with short responses that kept the conversation going, kept the uncertainty alive, kept people clicking and watching and coming back for more. He was not revealing truth. He was manufacturing doubt. And he was very, very good at it. At 2 in the morning, I was still watching when I heard the side gate open and Ray Pittman's truck pull into the driveway. He knocked on the kitchen door, the way he always did, 3 short knocks, then 1 long one, a habit from 30 years of showing up at job sites, where the noise level made doorbells useless. I let him in. He was carrying 2 coffees from the all-night diner on Colorado Boulevard, which told me Samantha had called him. He set 1 cup in front of me, pulled out the chair across the table, and sat down without a word. Then he looked at the laptop screen where Brandon's channel was still open and reached over and turned the laptop toward himself. He watched for 4 minutes without speaking. His jaw worked slowly the way it did when he was deciding something. Then he pushed the laptop back toward me, wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, and said, "Walter, that boy of yours turns people into characters. You understand what I'm saying? He doesn't make content about them. He makes content out of them. There's a difference." "I know," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Does Evelyn know he has this channel?" "She knows he makes YouTube videos. I don't think she knows what kind." Ray set his cup down on the table with a small, firm click. "Then she needs to know. And more than that, you need to know what he's planning. Because, Walter, I have been looking at that man's face for the last 4 minutes, and I am telling you right now, he did not drive out here from Manhattan for a pot roast dinner." I felt a cold thread move through my chest. I did not argue with him, because Ray Pittman had never once in 30 years told me something was wrong when it was not. "He was in the house," I said. "He went down the hallway after dinner. Samantha said he had his phone out." Ray looked at me steadily. "Where does that hallway go?" "The guest room, my study, the back bedroom." He picked his coffee back up. "You need to check your computer, Walter, your files. Anything you keep in that study." I had not thought of that. My chest tightened so hard it pushed the air out of me in a short, sharp breath that I tried to disguise as clearing my throat. I had not thought of that at all because I had been so focused on the photographs Samantha saw him taking that I had not considered what else he might have been looking for. I stood up, went down the hallway, and turned on the light in my study. Everything looked exactly as I had left it. The filing cabinet in the corner, the desk with the lamp, and the old calendar I kept forgetting to replace. The laptop I used for work documents closed on the corner of the desk. I opened it, checked the recent files, checked the browser history. Nothing had been touched, or, if it had been touched by someone who knew how to touch things without leaving a mark. I came back to the kitchen. Ray read my face before I said anything. "Nothing obvious," I said. "That doesn't mean nothing," he replied. I sat back down. Outside the street was completely quiet, the kind of quiet that Pasadena gets after midnight, when the last of the cars have come home, and the only sound is the occasional dog 2 blocks over. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup the way Ray had wrapped his, and for a moment, we were just 2 old electricians sitting at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, trying to understand a system neither of us had built. Then Ray said, "I want you to look up one more thing before you go to bed." He reached over, typed something into the laptop search bar, and turned the screen back toward me. It was a clip. Short, maybe 40 seconds, pulled from the comments section of one of Brandon's deleted videos. The original had been taken down, but someone had saved this piece of it. A young woman's face had been blurred. Her voice had not. She was saying in a voice that shook at the edges, the way a voice does when it is trying very hard not to break completely. "I just want to know why, that's all. I just want someone to tell me why." The clip ended. I sat very still in my chair. Something moved through me that I did not have a clean word for. Not quite grief, not quite rage. Something that lived in the territory between the two, and burned with the specific heat of a man who has just recognized a pattern he should have seen much sooner. Ray reached over and closed the laptop. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow you start paying closer attention." I nodded. But as I walked Ray to the door and watched him back his truck down the driveway, I was already thinking about what Brandon had said at the dinner table. I was already thinking about the hallway, and I was already thinking about the file on my desk with the name of my insurance company printed on the outside, and whether a man who filmed people without their knowledge would have any hesitation opening a folder that was not his. When I turned off the kitchen light and started up the stairs, I paused on the 3rd step. Down the hall, the guest room door was slightly open. A thin line of light showed underneath it. Brandon was still in the house. I did not sleep. I lay in bed next to Evelyn and listened to her breathing even out into the slow, steady rhythm of someone who had no reason to be afraid of the dark. And I stared at the ceiling and thought about 35 years of electrical work and the single most important lesson that work had ever taught me. When you suspect a fault in a system, you do not start pulling wires. You watch first. You document. You trace the current from its source to the point where it goes wrong, and you make sure you understand the full path before you touch anything. Because if you pull the wrong wire at the wrong moment, you do not fix the problem. You just give it somewhere new to hide. At 5:15 in the morning, I heard Brandon's alarm go off down the hall. A brief muffled sound, then silence. At 5:40, I heard the shower. At 6:10, I heard his footsteps in the hallway moving toward the kitchen. I got up, dressed quietly so as not to wake Evelyn, and went downstairs. Brandon was standing at the kitchen counter with his back to me, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in a low, careful voice, the kind of voice people use when they believe no one else is awake. I stopped in the shadow of the hallway, 3 feet from the kitchen doorway, and I listened. "The location works," Brandon said. "She goes every Saturday morning, always alone. I confirmed it twice." A pause. "No, the angle we talked about is fine. You put one in the exhibit program, one in the bag. She won't look twice at either of them." Another pause, longer this time. "It needs to feel completely real. That's the whole point. When she takes the bait, that's our money shot. That's what we're building the whole video around." My hand found the wall beside me. I pressed my palm flat against it and held it there because my legs had gone unsteady, in a way that had nothing to do with being tired, and everything to do with hearing my son discuss my wife, like she was a set piece in a production he was running. Brandon said a few more things I could not fully make out, then ended the call. I heard him set his phone on the counter. I heard him open the refrigerator. I took one breath, then another. Then I walked into the kitchen like a man who had come downstairs for coffee and nothing else. Brandon turned around. For one fraction of a second, something moved across his face, a flicker of calculation, quick as a blink, and then the smile was back, easy and practiced, and exactly the right temperature. "Morning, Dad. Didn't hear you come down." "Just woke up," I said. I moved to the coffee maker and started the morning routine filter grounds water, with my back to him because I needed a moment where he could not see my eyes. "You heading out early?" "Got a flight at noon," he said. "Lots to get back to." Of course. I turned around and handed him a mug. You want eggs before you go? He looked at the mug, then at me, and I watched him decide that everything was fine. Sure, he said. That'd be great. We ate eggs at the kitchen table and talked about nothing. The drive to LAX, the weather in New York, a restaurant he liked in Midtown that he thought I would enjoy if I ever visited. I asked questions and listened to his answers and kept my face in the arrangement of a father having a pleasant morning with his son. While somewhere behind that arrangement, my mind was moving very fast and very quietly through everything I had just heard. She goes every Saturday morning, always alone. He had been watching Evelyn. He had mapped her routine. He knew where she went and when and in what pattern. He had not learned that in one dinner. He had been gathering that information for longer than one evening, which meant the planning had started before he ever set foot in this house. After breakfast, Brandon went upstairs to collect his bag. He spent longer up there than packing should have required. 11 minutes by the clock on the kitchen wall. When he came back down, he was relaxed, unhurried. He said goodbye to Evelyn, who had come downstairs in her robe, her hair not yet done, and he hugged her with one arm, the way you hug someone you are still deciding about. He shook my hand at the door. Take care of yourself, Dad. Always do, I said. I watched his rental car back out of the driveway. I watched it reach the end of Mariposa Street and turn left. I stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then I went upstairs. I went to the room Brandon had slept in, and I stood in the doorway and looked at it. The bed was made not the way a housekeeper makes a bed, but the deliberate way of someone who does not want to leave a trace. The window was latched from the inside. The small desk in the corner had nothing on it now, but it had not been empty 20 minutes ago. When I had passed the doorway on my way to start the coffee, Brandon's laptop had been open on that desk, the screen still lit. I had stopped. I had looked at what was on the screen for long enough to photograph 3 pages of it with my phone before I heard the shower shut off down the hall. Then I kept walking and started the coffee and waited for my son to come downstairs. I crossed the hall to study. The filing cabinet was where I had left it. The desk lamp was at the same angle. My laptop was closed on the corner of the desk exactly as I kept it. I sat down in the desk chair and opened my laptop. The recent files had not been touched. The browser history was clean. The documents folder showed no new access. But the laptop had been moved. Not much, maybe half an inch to the left of the small scuff mark on the desk surface that I had always used unconsciously as a reference point. Half an inch. The kind of adjustment a person makes when they pick something up and set it back down, trying to replace it, precisely, and missing by just enough for someone who knew to look. I sat there for a long time, with my hands flat on the desk and my eyes on that half-inch gap between the laptop and the scuff mark. He had been in here. He had looked through my laptop and found whatever he was looking for, or not found it, and he had put everything back almost exactly right. Almost. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the desk and took out the yellow legal pad I used for notes. I found a pen, and I began to write down everything I knew in the careful sequential way I had always documented electrical faults. Date, time, observation, implication, next step. I wrote for 40 minutes. When I was done, I read back through what I had written. Then I picked up my phone and called Ray. He answered on the second ring. How bad, he said, because Ray Pittman had known me long enough to know that a call before 7 in the morning was not a social call. Bad enough, I said, but here's the thing, Ray. If I confront him right now, he cancels whatever he is planning and finds another way, and I cannot protect Evelyn from something I cannot see. Ray was quiet for a moment, not silent. I could hear him breathing, hear the sound of his truck door opening. So, what are you going to do? I am going to let it run, I said. I am going to let him build whatever he is building, and I am going to document every piece of it. And when he thinks he has won, I am going to show him what I found. There was a pause. Then Ray said, You sound like a man who just found the short in the line. I found the source, I said. Now I need to follow it all the way to the fault. I hung up the phone, picked up the legal pad, and wrote one more line at the bottom of the page. Then I put it in the bottom drawer under the insurance files and locked it. When I came downstairs, Evelyn was in the kitchen refilling her coffee. She looked up and smiled at me, the open, uncomplicated smile of a woman who had made her peace with the world and was genuinely glad to be in it. He seemed better this time, she said. Don't you think a little warmer? My throat tightened with an ache that went all the way down into my chest. Maybe, I said. and I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood beside her at the kitchen window and looked out at the garden she had started planting along the back fence, and I made a promise to myself and to her, though she did not know it, that whatever was coming, I was going to be ready for it before it arrived. For 2 weeks I watched my wife live her life and said nothing. I watched her tend the garden along the back fence, adding a row of marigolds beside the rosemary she had planted in October. I watched her make coffee every morning, in the particular way she had, 2 scoops a pinch of cinnamon, the lid of the canister always replaced before she poured, as though the small rituals of a day were worth doing correctly or not doing at all. I watched her sit at the kitchen table on Tuesday evenings, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, marking up library books with little sticky notes that she always removed before returning them, because she did not believe in leaving her opinions in someone else's copy. I watched her, and I loved her, and I said nothing. Because I had made a decision, and the decision required patience of a kind that sat in the chest like a stone and did not move. Ray had confirmed through a contact he had at a production supply company in Burbank that someone matching Brandon's description had rented 2 small body cameras and a remote receiver unit 3 days after the welcome dinner. The rental was under a company name Ray could not fully pull yet, but the timing was not a coincidence, and we both knew it. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium held an arts and culture exhibition every 4th Saturday of the month. Evelyn had been going for 2 years, always alone, always in the morning, because she said the crowds thickened by afternoon and she preferred to look at things without feeling rushed. She had mentioned it to Brandon at the dinner table. I remembered now a small offhand comment about a watercolor series she was looking forward to, and I had watched Brandon nod in that filing information way of his, and I had not thought anything of it at the time. I thought about it now. On the Friday evening before the 4th Saturday of October, I told Evelyn I had agreed to help Ray move some equipment at his storage unit in Arcadia first thing in the morning. On a Saturday, she said, looking up from her book. He needs an extra set of hands, I said. It won't take long. I'll be back before lunch. She accepted this without suspicion, because I had never given her a reason to look for suspicion in the things I said. That fact sat in my stomach like a coal hot and uncomfortable, and I carried it to bed with me and lay with it through most of the night. At 7:15 the next morning, I kissed her on the forehead, while she was still half asleep, told her the coffee was already made, and drove not to Ray's storage unit, but to the parking structure on Garfield Avenue 2 blocks from the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Ray was already there, parked on the 3rd level, his truck backed into a corner space with a clear sightline to the auditorium's main entrance. He had a small pair of binoculars on the dashboard that he had brought without being asked, because Ray Pittman understood what a stakeout required, even though neither of us had ever used that word out loud. "She leave yet?" I asked, climbing into the passenger seat. 7 minutes ago, he said. "Blue cardigan, brown bag. She took Mariposa to Colorado and walked from there." He paused. She stopped to look at the roses outside the Lutheran church on the corner. Something moved through my chest at that. A warmth and an ache pressed together into a single feeling I did not have a name for. "Any sign of the crew?" I asked. "2 of them. One went in 20 minutes before she arrived. The other is stationed near the east entrance with what looks like a shoulder bag that's sitting wrong, too rigid on the left side, like there's something mounted inside the lining." Ray picked up his coffee. "They're good, Walter, but not that good." At 8:47, a man came out of the east entrance and stood at the top of the steps for a moment, straightening his jacket. He was younger than I had expected, maybe 28, 29, with the kind of deliberate grooming that spoke of someone accustomed to being looked at. He wore a gray suit that fit him well and carried himself with the ease of a person playing a role he had rehearsed enough times to stop feeling like a role. This was Marcus Webb. I knew it before Ray said anything, because the way Marcus paused at the top of those steps and looked towards the main exhibition hall had nothing to do with appreciation for art. It was the pause of someone checking their mark. "There he is," Ray said quietly. I said nothing. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs and watched. Marcus went back inside. Ray and I sat in the truck. 6 minutes passed. Then Ray handed me the binoculars, and I looked through the tall glass panels along the front face of the auditorium from our position on the 3rd level of the parking structure, and I saw them. Evelyn was standing in front of a large abstract painting, deep blues and burnt oranges, the kind of piece she always gravitated toward. She had her head tilted slightly to the right, the way she did, when something caught her genuine attention, her brown bag hanging from one shoulder, her reading glasses folded and tucked into the front pocket of her cardigan. Marcus Webb was walking toward her. I gripped the door handle, not to open it, just to hold something. Ray put his hand on my arm. "Let it play," he said. His voice was low and firm and left no room for argument. I let it play. I watched Marcus approach Evelyn and say something that made her turn toward him with polite surprise. I watched them exchange what appeared to be pleasantries, the easy surface-level talk of two strangers in a public space. Then I watched Marcus shift his posture, lean slightly forward, and begin the part of the conversation that was not pleasantries. I could not hear the words through the glass, but I could read the shape of it. I had been married twice and worked alongside enough people to know the difference between a conversation and a pitch. This was a pitch. Evelyn's response was immediate and physical. Her chin came up, not aggressively, just levelly. The way a person lifts their chin when they are choosing to speak from a place of certainty rather than reaction. Her shoulders, which had been slightly curved in the relaxed posture of someone enjoying their Saturday morning, straightened in a way that added about an inch to her height without her appearing to try. She spoke. Marcus listened. Marcus spoke again. Evelyn shook her head once cleanly. I pressed my hand harder against the door handle and felt the metal edge dig into my palm. Marcus tried again. I could see it in the shift of his weight, the slight recalibration of his approach. He said something that was meant to land differently, something aimed at a different angle. Evelyn set her brown bag down on the low bench beside her. She turned to face Marcus directly the way you turn to face something you intend to address completely. She spoke for what felt like 30 seconds, not hurried, not loud, just clear. The kind of clarity that comes from a woman who has spent 22 years making herself understood to 8-year-olds and has long since mastered the art of saying exactly what she means and nothing more. Marcus took a small step back. Evelyn picked up her bag, said one more thing that looked like a courteous conclusion, and turned back to the painting. She tilted her head to the right again. She was looking at the blues and the burnt oranges. She looked completely, utterly at peace. Marcus Webb stood behind her for a moment, and I saw something happen on his face that I had not expected to see on the face of a man doing what he was doing for money. He looked uncomfortable, not caught out uncomfortable, not professionally embarrassed, genuinely humanly uncomfortable. Like a man who had just done something he could not fully justify to himself. He turned and walked toward the east entrance. Ray exhaled slowly beside me. I realized my jaw had been clenched so hard that the muscles at the hinge of it were aching. I opened my mouth and closed it again, and looked at my hands on the dashboard. "She didn't even hesitate," I said. My voice came out thick in a way I had not prepared for, and I stopped talking immediately because I did not want Ray to hear me come apart in the cab of his truck over something that I should have known all along. Ray picked up his phone, dialed, and when Marcus Webb answered, because Ray had obtained his number through the same Burbank contact who had tracked the camera rental, he said 4 words. She didn't take it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus Webb said, in a voice that carried a complicated weight I would not fully understand until much later, "I know, I was there." Ray hung up. I stared through the windshield at the glass panels of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, where my wife was standing in front of a painting she loved on a Saturday morning, completely unaware that 2 men in a parking structure were watching over her, and that the son of the man she had married had spent weeks arranging for her to be tested and filmed without her knowledge or consent. California law, I would later learn from Frank Okafor, was very specific about that last part. Recording a private conversation without the consent of all parties was not a gray area. It was not a technicality. It was a violation, and it had a code number and a penalty attached to it. And it had happened this morning in a public building in Pasadena, while Evelyn looked at blues and burnt oranges and thought about nothing but the painting. I picked up my own phone and called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, warm and unhurried. "How's Ray's storage unit?" "Fine," I said. "How's the exhibition?" "Wonderful. There's a watercolor series I think you'd actually like. Very precise, very clean lines." A small laugh. "Very you." My throat closed around something I could not say. "I'll see you at lunch," I managed. "I'll make sandwiches," she said. "Drive safe." I set the phone down on the seat between us. Ray started the truck. Neither of us spoke for the first 2 blocks because some things sit too heavily for immediate conversation. And Ray Pittman had always known the difference between silence that needed filling and silence that needed respecting. Then he said, "What's next?" I looked straight ahead through the windshield at the Saturday morning streets of Pasadena. "We wait," I said. "Brandon has his footage. Now we wait to see what he does with it." Brandon called on a Tuesday evening, 11 days after the exhibition. I was in the garage checking the breaker panel, a habit from 35 years that I had never fully managed to leave behind the compulsion to make sure the connections were sound before anything went wrong when my phone buzzed on the workbench. "Dad." His voice was warm in a way that put me immediately on alert, because Brandon's warmth had always run in direct proportion to what he wanted from a conversation. "I've been thinking. We got off to a rough start with the whole wedding situation, and I want to fix that. I want to do something for you and Evelyn. Dinner at your place this Saturday. I'll bring food. I'll handle everything. You just tell me how many people you want there." I leaned against the workbench and looked at the breaker panel and said, "That's generous, Brandon." "It's the least I can do," he said. "Invite whoever you want, family, neighbors, whoever. I want this to feel like a real celebration." After I hung up, I stood in the garage for a long time, running my thumb along the edge of my phone case. Then I went inside and called Ray. "He's ready to move," Ray said before I had finished explaining. "Saturday," I said. "Then we need to be ready before Saturday." By Thursday evening, I had done 3 things. I had called Frank Okafor and spent 40 minutes on the phone describing everything I had documented in the yellow legal pad since October. Frank had listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said in the careful, measured voice of a man who chose his words the way a surgeon chose an instrument, "Walter, keep documenting. Do not confront him before Saturday. Whatever he puts on that screen, let it play completely before you respond." I had agreed. The second thing I had done was transfer the recordings from Ray's equipment onto an encrypted drive that Frank had recommended and load the relevant files onto my personal laptop in a folder labeled simply November. The third thing I had done was place my laptop on the bookshelf in the living room on Thursday afternoon, connected to the television via a cable I had run along the baseboard and tucked neatly under the edge of the rug. It was there when guests arrived on Saturday. No one noticed it. Why would they? It looked like a cable. 15 people came to dinner on Saturday evening. Brandon had arranged catering trays of food from an Italian place in Arcadia. Good wine, a dessert table that Evelyn stood in front of for a moment with genuine pleasure, before reminding herself to wait until after the meal. He moved through the room with the ease of a man in his element, refilling glasses and making introductions and asking the right questions of the right people, and I watched several of my neighbors and 2 of my cousins visibly warm to him within the first hour. He was very good at this. I had always known that. The performance of warmth was its own skill entirely separate from the thing itself. Evelyn was in her element too, but differently. She laughed at things because they were funny, not because laughing was useful. She remembered the name of my cousin Gerald's new granddaughter from a mention 3 weeks ago and asked about her. She made sure the woman from next door who had come alone and knew almost no one had a full plate and someone to talk to. She did these things without appearing to do them the way a person does things that are simply part of who they are. I watched both of them all evening and said very little. Dinner finished at 8:30. Brandon began clearing plates with a cheerfulness that I recognize now as the specific energy of a man approaching the moment he had been building toward. He disappeared into the kitchen for 10 minutes. When he came back, he was pushing a large flat-screen television on a rolling stand, the kind used for presentations rented from somewhere, because I had never owned anything like it. The room shifted, not dramatically, just the subtle reconfiguration that happens when furniture appears where furniture was not, and people turn in their chairs to look at it. "I want to show everyone something," Brandon said. He stood beside the television with one hand resting on its frame, and he smiled at the room with the smile I had been watching and studying for 6 weeks. "Something I've been working on, something I think is important for this family." My cousin Gerald looked at the television with mild curiosity. The woman from next door leaned forward slightly. Samantha, who was sitting at the far end of the room, near the kitchen doorway, went completely still in a way that I recognized as her version of bracing for impact. Evelyn was sitting beside me on the small sofa, her shoulder 3 inches from mine, her coffee cup held in both hands. Brandon pressed play. The screen filled with footage from the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. The colors were sharp and close. The body cameras Brandon's crew had used were professional grade, and the image was clear enough that there was no question about what you were seeing. Evelyn in her blue cardigan with her brown bag, the blues and burnt oranges of the painting she had been looking at, Marcus Webb in his gray suit appearing from the left side of the frame. I felt Evelyn go rigid beside me. Not a big movement, just the sudden absolute stillness of a body that has just recognized itself on a screen it was never meant to be on. Her coffee cup stopped moving. Her breathing changed. I wanted to take her hand. I did not because I needed to watch the room. The footage played. Marcus Webb delivered his lines with professional smoothness. Evelyn's responses heard now through the body camera's microphone, rather than read from 40 yards away. Through a parking structure, windshield were even clearer and more definite than I had been able to see from a distance. I chose my husband because he makes me feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be, Evelyn said on the screen, in a voice that was calm and certain and utterly without performance. That is not something money can buy. The room was very quiet. Brandon had expected a different kind of quiet, the electric leaning forward quiet of people who have just seen something scandalous and are waiting to react. What he got instead was the heavy flat quiet of people who were working out what they had just witnessed and arriving one by one at an answer that was not the one he had scripted for them. Gerald cleared his throat. A woman named Patricia, who had worked with Linda at the school district for 12 years and had known our family since Brandon was in middle school, set her wine glass down on the side table with a small, deliberate sound. Evelyn did not move beside me. She was looking at the screen with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not tears, not the wounded collapse I had been afraid of. Something more contained than any of those things, and more frightening in its containment. The expression of a woman who was deciding very carefully what this moment was going to cost her, and what it was not. The footage ended. The screen went blue. Brandon looked at the room expectantly, his hands slightly open at his sides, ready to receive the vindication he had spent weeks assembling. Patricia spoke first. Brandon. Her voice was quiet, and even the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years in school administration and had sat across from a lot of people who believed their reasons justified their actions. You filmed your father's wife without her knowledge, in a situation you arranged for a video. She paused. What exactly were you hoping we would take away from that? The question landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. The ripples moved outward and nobody rushed to fill them. Brandon opened his mouth. I was trying to show what Gerald said, not unkindly, but not softly either. That she loves your father, because that's what I saw. I felt Evelyn's shoulder press against mine, not leaning, just the small involuntary movement of a body that needs to confirm it is not alone. Brandon's jaw tightened. You're not seeing the full context. We saw what you showed us, Patricia said. I put my coffee cup down on the table in front of me. The small sound of ceramic on wood was somehow the loudest thing in the room. Every face turned toward me. I stood up. And I looked at my son across the living room of the house he had grown up in, with 15 people between us and the blue glow of the television screen behind him. And I said in a voice that I kept very, very quiet, I have something to show everyone, too. I walked to the bookshelf. I picked up my laptop. Behind me, I heard Evelyn set her coffee cup down as well. The sound of it was different from mine, more deliberate, more final. The sound of a woman setting something down that she intended to deal with fully and on her own terms. I plugged the cable into the port on the side of the laptop and looked at the television screen as it switched from blue to the folder I had labeled November. Brandon stared at the laptop in my hands. For the first time since October, the smile was completely gone. The first file I opened was the audio recording from the morning Brandon stood in my kitchen and thought no one was listening. His voice filled the living room through the television speakers, clear and unhurried, the voice of a man who believed he was entirely alone and in complete control of what he was building. The location works. She goes every Saturday morning, always alone. I confirmed it twice. I heard someone in the room draw a sharp breath. I did not look to see who. I kept my eyes on the laptop screen. It needs to feel completely real. That's the whole point. When she takes the bait, that's our money shot. That's what we're building the whole video around. The recording ended. No one spoke for a moment, not because they had nothing to say, but because the room was doing the work of absorbing what it had just heard, the difference between what Brandon had presented 12 minutes ago as concern for his father and what his own voice had just described in language that belonged to a production meeting, not a family. Brandon took one step forward. That recording is completely out of Brandon. My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Sit down. He did not sit down, but he stopped moving. I opened the second file. This one was a series of text messages displayed as screenshots on the screen, enlarged enough for everyone in the room to read without straining. They were the messages Brandon had sent to Marcus Webb over the 2 weeks between the welcome dinner and the exhibition. Ray had reached out to Marcus through his Burbank contact in the days leading up to this dinner, and Marcus, already uncomfortable with what he had been hired to do, had handed everything over without being asked twice. The messages were specific. They included Evelyn's full name. They included the address of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. They included the line of approach Marcus was to use, the escalation points if the first approach was declined, and the camera positions that Brandon's crew had agreed on in advance. One message near the bottom of the chain read, "Make sure you get her face when she engages. That's the clip we're building the thumbnail around." Patricia made a sound that was not quite a word. Gerald leaned forward with both elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. Samantha, from her position near the kitchen doorway, had both arms wrapped around herself and was staring at Brandon with an expression that mixed fury and something that looked almost like grief. The grief of someone watching a person confirm the worst thing they had suspected about them. Evelyn had not moved beside me, but I could feel the change in her, the way a wall you are leaning against shifts when something on the other side of it applies pressure. She was holding herself together with a precision that cost her something, and I could feel the cost of it without looking at her directly. I opened the third file. This was the production schedule document I had found on Brandon's laptop in October, the one titled "Testing My Dad's New Wife Before It's Too Late." I had photographed it on my phone before Brandon woke up that morning, transferred the image to the encrypted drive Frank had recommended, and it had been sitting in the folder labeled November ever since. The document showed everything: the timeline, the location, the name of the production company, the projected upload date, the estimated view count Brandon had written in the margin in his own handwriting, circled twice. The room read it. I gave them time to read it. Then Brandon's voice cracked open. "You went through my laptop." The words came out hot and fractured, stripped of the careful calibration he had maintained all evening. His face had gone red in patches, the way faces go red when the emotion behind them is too large and too fast to distribute evenly. "You went through my things, in my own father's house." "In my house," I said, "where you came as a guest. I came to protect you." His voice climbed. "I came because I was worried about you, and instead of being grateful, you set me up, like I'm some kind of Brandon." It was Samantha who said it. Her voice was not loud either, but it cut through the room in a way that made him stop. She had unfolded her arms. She was standing straight, and her eyes were bright with tears. She was not going to shed in front of this room. "Stop. Just stop talking right now." He turned toward her. "You don't understand what she might be." "I understand what I just read," Samantha said. "Projected view count, circled twice." Her voice broke on the last word, and then hardened again immediately, the way young voices do when they are refusing to let emotion win. "You came to our home, and you circled the view count." The room went the kind of quiet that has weight to it. I closed the laptop. Evelyn stood up beside me. She did not say anything to Brandon. She did not look at him. She picked up her coffee cup from the table, carried it to the kitchen with both hands wrapped around it, and I heard the sound of her setting it in the sink. Not slamming it, just setting it down carefully, the way you set something down, when you are afraid of what you might do if you are not careful. Then I heard Samantha's footsteps cross the room. Then the sound of the kitchen door opening and closing. Then nothing from that direction, except the low murmur of two women who loved each other, finding a way to stand in the same room with what had just happened. Brandon stood in the middle of the living room, with 15 people around him, and nowhere to put what was left of his evening. Gerald stood up from his chair and said quietly to no one in particular, "I think I'll head home." He picked up his jacket and nodded at me once on the way to the door, the nod of a man who has seen enough and has the decency not to make it worse by staying. The room emptied in the way. Rooms empty after something goes wrong at a gathering, not all at once, but in ones and twos, with murmured goodbyes and hands briefly pressed to my arm and eyes that said more than the words attached to them. Patricia was last. She stopped beside me at the door, and she put her hand on my arm and held it there for a moment. "Linda would have handled that exactly the same way," she said, quietly and completely. I could not answer that. I pressed her hand with mine, and she left. I stood alone in the doorway of my house and looked at the empty driveway and the quiet street beyond it. Behind me, Brandon was still in the living room. He had not moved toward the door. He had not apologized. He was standing beside the rolling television stand with his hands in his jacket pockets, and when I turned around and looked at him, He met my eyes with an expression that had cycled through anger and shame and landed finally on something I recognized with a sorrow I had not been fully prepared for. Defiance. Even now. Even here. "I was trying to protect you," he said again. But the words had lost their architecture. They were just sounds now, the verbal equivalent of a circuit running on habit after the power source had been cut. I looked at my son for a long moment. "Good night, Brandon," I said. I woke at 4:53 in the morning and did not try to go back to sleep. Brandon had left sometime after midnight. I had heard the front door close from where I lay in the dark, and I had not gotten up. Evelyn was still beside me, her breathing slow and even. But I had learned in the weeks since October that slow and even breathing is not always the breathing of someone who is at peace. Sometimes it is the breathing of someone who has made a decision to rest, because rest is what the next day requires, regardless of what the night is doing to them. I got up without turning on the light. I found my clothes in the dark the way I had learned to do in 35 years of early morning job sites. I went downstairs and started the coffee and stood at the kitchen window while it brewed, looking out at the garden along the back fence where Evelyn's marigolds had started to go brown at the edges with the November cold. My phone was on the counter. I had turned it face down the night before. I turned it over now. 41 notifications. Not from people I knew. From the edges of Brandon's world, comment threads and tagged posts, and the particular kind of online attention that moves like weather, arriving all at once from a direction you did not think to watch. Brandon had uploaded the video sometime after midnight. The title across the top of his channel page read, "I tested my dad's new wife, and here's what really happened." I set the phone down and poured my coffee. The video had been online for less than 6 hours and already had more comments than I could count. Most of them directed not at Evelyn, but at Brandon, and not in the way he had intended. The words people were using were not the words of an audience that had found its villain. They were the words of people who had watched a son film his father's wife without her knowledge, and were responding to that fact with the directness that online strangers reserve for situations they find genuinely indefensible. I did not read the comments for long, not because they upset me, but because they were not mine to feel satisfied by. Whatever happened to Brandon's channel in the next 48 hours was a consequence he had constructed for himself, wire by wire, over the past 2 months, and I did not need to watch it happen to know it was happening. At 9:17, my phone rang. "Brandon," I answered on the third ring. "You set me up." His voice was raw in a way that the previous night's defiance had not been the rawness of someone who had been awake since the upload and had spent those hours watching the numbers move in the wrong direction. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You planned the whole thing." "Yes," I said. I did not elaborate. There was a silence on his end that lasted long enough to tell me he had not expected that answer. He had expected a denial or an apology or some version of a father backing down from a confrontation with his son. He had not built a model for this. "You made me look like the villain," he said. "Brandon." I kept my voice level and clear. "I showed people what you built. The way it looked is the way it was." That's not... His voice cracked and then hardened again. "Dad, I was trying to protect you. How many times do I have to say that before you hear it?" "I hear it every time you say it," I said. "I just don't think it means what you think it means." He made a sound that was not quite a word, the compressed, frustrated sound of a man who has run out of arguments and knows it. Then he said, "This is going to cost me everything. Do you understand that? My partnerships, my channel, everything I've built." "I know," I said, "and you don't care." I looked out the kitchen window at the marigolds going brown in the November cold. "I care very much," I said. "I just care about different things than you do right now." He hung up. I held the phone in my hand for a moment, feeling the weight of it, and then I set it back on the counter and finished my coffee. Evelyn came downstairs at 8 o'clock. She was dressed and her hair was done, and she moved through the kitchen with the deliberate normalcy of a woman who has decided that the shape of her morning will not be determined by what someone else did the night before. She poured herself coffee, added her pinch of cinnamon, replaced the lid of the canister, and then turned and looked at me with eyes that were tired in a specific interior way that had nothing to do with sleep. "How bad is it?" she asked. "On his channel," I said. "Bad for him. Nothing that touches you." She nodded once. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked out the same window I had been looking out all morning. "I keep thinking about the fact that he watched me," she said, "that he knew which Saturday I went, that he knew I went alone. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles had gone white around the mug. I keep thinking about how long he must have been watching before any of this started. I know, I said. I crossed the kitchen and stood beside her, and we both looked out at the garden together. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I should have told you sooner what I suspected. She turned her head and looked at me directly, and the look she gave me was not the look of a woman who was angry. It was the look of a woman who was deciding whether the thing she was about to say was going to be useful or just honest and choosing useful. You were protecting me the only way you knew how, she said. Don't apologize for that. Just don't do it again. I won't, I said. She nodded. She turned back to the window. Outside, a pair of sparrows landed on the back fence and then left again, immediately startled by something neither of us could see. Ray arrived at 2 in the afternoon. He came the way he always came, 3 short knocks, 1 long. And when I let him in, he had 2 coffees from the Colorado Boulevard diner and a look on his face that meant he had information he had been holding since morning and was ready to put it on the table. He sat down. He set the coffees between us. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a small folded piece of paper, which he set on the table, and pushed toward me without unfolding it. Her name is Claire Donovan, he said. Brooklyn, New York. She called me 4 days ago, said she had been following what was happening online, and there were things about Brandon that she felt you needed to hear. He tapped the paper once with 2 fingers. That's her number. She said call any time. I looked at the folded paper on the table. Claire Donovan. The name moved through me with a familiarity that took me a moment to place. Then I had it 2 years ago, a phone call from Brandon, a story about a relationship that had ended quietly and without drama, a name mentioned once and then not again when I chose to ask a follow-up question. Brandon had changed the subject so smoothly that I had barely noticed the pivot at the time. I noticed it now. I picked up the paper and unfolded it. A phone number written in Ray's careful handwriting. A Brooklyn area code. Did she say what kind of things? I asked. Ray picked up his coffee. She said she recognized Evelyn's face in the video, he said. Said she recognized the situation too. He looked at me over the rim of the cup. Said she'd been in it herself. The kitchen went very quiet around us. Not the heavy quiet of the night before, but the particular quiet of a room where 2 people have just understood something at the same time, and neither of them is in a hurry to be the first to say it out loud. I folded the paper again and put it in the breast pocket of my shirt directly over my heart, which was beating with a steadiness that surprised me given everything it was currently carrying. I'll call her tonight, I said. Ray nodded. He drank his coffee. Outside, the November light was already starting to thin toward afternoon, the way California light does in the later months, not dramatically, just quietly withdrawing, as though the day has decided it has shown you enough, and the rest is yours to figure out in the dark. Before we go any further on, Revenge Dad, if you are still here with me, drop the number 9 in the comments right now. Just the number. That tells me you are in this story all the way, and it means everything to me. Because what I am about to share next, what a woman named Claire told me from Brooklyn on a quiet November night, changed everything I thought I understood about my own son. A quick note, this story contains fictional elements woven in for reflection and entertainment. Some details have been shaped for storytelling, but if this kind of content is not for you, no hard feelings at all, you are free to step away anytime. I waited until 9 o'clock, not because 9 o'clock meant anything particular, but because I had spent the evening sitting with Evelyn on the back porch while she watered the potted herbs she kept near the door, and I had not wanted to leave that. The ordinary living weight of her beside me, the sound of water on soil, the way the porch light caught the silver in her hair. I had wanted to hold on to that for as long as I reasonably could before I went and made the evening heavier. At 9, I told her I needed to make a call. She looked at me the way she sometimes did, not asking, just registering, and said she was going to read for a while. I kissed her on the cheek and went out to the car and sat in the driveway in the dark with the engine off, and the November cold seeping in through the windows. I dialed the number Ray had written down. It rang twice. Mr. Hayes. Her voice was steady and clear, with the particular composure of someone who had been expecting this call and had decided in advance how they were going to handle it. I'm glad you called. Thank you for reaching out to Ray, I said. I understand you knew Brandon. For 2 years, she said. We were together in New York. I moved there for work, and we met at a friend's birthday, and it seemed... She stopped. I heard her take a breath and release it. It seemed like the real thing, for a while. What happened? The pause that followed was not the pause of someone deciding whether to tell the truth. It was the pause of someone deciding where to start. "The first time I didn't know," she said. "I was at a coffee shop near my office, and a man sat down next to me and started talking. He was charming. He said he recognized me from somewhere. I talked to him for maybe 10 minutes, told him I had a boyfriend and left." Another breath. "3 days later, Brandon showed me the video. He said he'd needed to know. He said I had passed and that it proved he could trust me. He thought I would be relieved." "Were you—" "I was sick to my stomach," she said, and the composure in her voice developed a hairline fracture that she sealed almost immediately. "Because I understood what it meant. It meant he had been watching me. It meant he had arranged something without telling me, and it meant that in his mind my whole value as a person had just been decided by 10 minutes in a coffee shop with a stranger he hired." I pressed my hand flat against the steering wheel and held it there. "He did it 2 more times," she said. "The second time I suspected it was happening, and I still couldn't prove it. The third time—" She stopped again. This stop was different, longer. "The third time he had someone approach me at work, in the lobby of my office building. My supervisor saw. She pulled me into her office the next day and told me that my position required a certain standard of professional conduct, and that if I was having personal situations follow me into the workplace, she would have to reconsider my role." "You lost your job," I said. 2 weeks later," she said. "Yes." The cold in the car was settling in properly now, finding the gaps in my jacket pressing against my hands on the steering wheel. I did not start the engine. I did not want the sound of it. "Claire," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me even if the answer is difficult." "Ask it." "After the 3rd test, did he ever tell you what would have happened if you hadn't passed?" The silence that followed this question had a different texture than the ones before it. It was the silence of someone who had been waiting for a specific door to open and was now deciding how to walk through it. "He didn't tell me," she said, "but I found out. She told me about a conversation she had seen on his phone, not snooping. She said just a notification that appeared on the screen when she was sitting next to him on the couch and he had fallen asleep. A message from someone on his production team. She had read 3 sentences before she looked away. "What did it say?" I asked. Her voice was very controlled when she answered. "It said, and I'm going to quote this as closely as I can remember it, 'If she engages, we have what we need. If she doesn't, we edit around the pass and use the approach footage. The audience doesn't need to see the outcome if the setup is compelling enough.'" I stopped breathing for a moment. Then I started again slowly, the way you restart a breath after something has knocked it out of you. "He was going to edit the footage to make you look guilty," I said. "Even if you passed." "Yes," she said. "The truth was never the point. The story was the point. And he was going to tell whatever version of the story got the most views." The steering wheel was very cold under my hands. Outside the car, Mariposa Street was completely dark except for the porch light of the house across the way and the thin slice of light coming from under our front door where Evelyn was inside reading. I thought about Evelyn standing in front of blues and burnt oranges with her head tilted to the right. I thought about what might have happened to that image in Brandon's editing software if she had said one wrong word, or smiled at the wrong moment, or given him anything at all to work with. My throat tightened with a fury that I had been keeping at a careful distance for 6 weeks, and I let it sit there for exactly as long as it needed to, and then I put it back where it belonged, because fury was not what this phone call required. "Claire," I said, "would you be willing to put any of this in writing messages, anything you have?" "I have the screenshot," she said immediately. "I took it that night. I don't know why. I think I knew even then that I was going to need it someday." A pause. "I'll send it to you tonight." "Thank you," I said. "Mr. Hayes." Her voice shifted slightly, not softer, just more direct. "Before you go, I want you to know something." She took a breath. "I spent a long time after Brandon wondering if I had done something to deserve those tests. If I had given him some reason not to trust me. I went through everything I could remember, and I could not find it. But I kept looking anyway because it seemed impossible that someone would do that to a person who hadn't earned it somehow." She stopped. "I want you to tell Evelyn that it isn't about her. It never was. It was never about any of us." I could not answer that immediately. Something in my chest was pressing too hard against the back of my sternum for words to get past it cleanly. "I'll tell her," I said. "One more thing," Claire said. "Do yourself a favor before you do anything else. Look up who owns the production company he used, the one he hired for the filming. A brief pause. You might recognize the name on the paperwork. I sat with that for a moment. I will, I said. Thank you, Claire. Good luck, Mr. Hayes. The line went quiet. I sat in the dark car in the driveway for a long time after that, with the cold working its way fully into the cab now, and my breath visible in the air in front of me, thinking about a young woman in Brooklyn who had taken a screenshot on a sleepy Sunday night and held onto it for 2 years without knowing exactly why. Then I went inside, found Ray's number, and typed 4 words into a text message. Check the production company. Ray called at 7:15 the next morning. I was already at the kitchen table with the laptop open and my second cup of coffee going cold beside me. I had been up since 5:30, which was becoming a pattern I no longer bothered to resist. BH Content LLC, Ray said without a greeting. Registered in Delaware, 3 years ago. You want to know who the registered agent is? I already knew, but I let him say it. Brandon Daniel Hayes, Ray said. Home address listed as Manhattan, New York. The company has been operating under that registration for 34 months. I set my cup down. Brandon had not simply hired a production company. He had built one. He was not a client who had paid for a service. He was the owner, the producer, and the primary beneficiary of every video that company had ever made. Every loyalty test, every dossier on every person who had ever been placed in one of his scenarios had passed through a company that existed under his name and generated income that went directly into his account, including the one involving Evelyn. Samantha arrived at 8 o'clock. She had called the night before and asked if she could come over, and I had said yes without asking why, because I had understood from her voice that she needed to be somewhere that felt solid. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, with both hands wrapped around a mug, and looked at the laptop screen, as Ray, who had come by as well and was standing at the counter, walked us through what he had found. 4 videos in 2 years, 4 different families, a couple in Queens, New York, a family in San Diego, a pair of sisters in Chicago, and now, us. Samantha's jaw tightened with each one. By the 4th, she had stopped looking at the screen and was staring at the table. Instead, her mug held very still between her palms. He built a business out of this, she said. It was not a question. Yes, I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dry, but the skin around them was tight in the way that happens just before dry becomes something else. Does my mother know yet? Not this part, I said. Not yet. Samantha pressed her lips together and nodded once the nod of someone absorbing a piece of information and deciding where to store it before they respond to it. I printed the Delaware registration documents, the company filing record, and the screenshots Claire had sent overnight, the text exchange between Brandon and his crew, the line about editing around the pass, if necessary. I put everything into the blue folder that had been growing thicker on the corner of my desk since October. The folder was nearly an inch thick now. I called Frank Okafor at 9 o'clock. He answered himself, which told me his assistant had not yet arrived. His voice was the same as it always was, level, unhurried, the voice of a man who had spent 30 years listening to people in difficult situations, and had long since learned that calm was the most useful thing he could offer. I need to come in today, I said. I have a folder you need to see. 2 o'clock, he said. Bring everything. His office was on Colorado Boulevard, 4 blocks from where I had parked on the morning of the exhibition, which struck me as the kind of geographical coincidence that meant nothing but felt like something. I sat across from his desk at 2 o'clock and watched him read through the folder without speaking. He read carefully and completely the way lawyers read when they are building something in their heads as they go. When he finished, he set the folder on the desk and folded his hands on top of it. The recording you made of your son's phone call, he said. Where were you when you made it? In my own hallway, I said. In my own house. Frank nodded. California Penal Code 632 requires the consent of all parties to record a private conversation. However, there is a recognized exception when the recording is made by a party to the conversation, or, in certain circumstances involving communications occurring in a residence. We will need to establish the specifics carefully. He paused. The more significant exposure for your son is the recording he made of Evelyn at the exhibition. She did not consent. She was not a public figure performing a public act. The conversation was private in nature, regardless of the public venue. That is a clear violation. Can it be prosecuted? I asked. It can be prosecuted criminally or pursued civilly, Frank said. A civil action would likely move faster and give Evelyn more direct remedy. He picked up his pen. The text messages from Claire Donovan are significant as well. The line about editing around the pass establishes intent to defraud not just ethically, but potentially legally, depending on how the content was monetized and represented. He wrote something on his notepad. Then he set the pen down and looked at me directly. "Walter," he said, "before we discuss next steps, I need to ask you something." He held my eyes steadily. "In October, shortly after the wedding, did your son ask you to sign any documents? Any paperwork he may have described as routine or precautionary?" The question arrived in my chest like a cold key turning in a lock I had not known was there. I looked at Frank Okafor across his desk on Colorado Boulevard, with the afternoon sun coming through the blinds behind him in thin horizontal lines, and I felt something shift in the floor of what I thought I had already understood about the past 2 months. "Yes," I said slowly. "He did. I drove home from Frank's office with both hands on the wheel and my mind running backward through October. The evening had been ordinary in the way. Evenings are ordinary when you do not yet know they matter. Brandon had called that afternoon 3 weeks after the welcome dinner, 4 days after I had found the production schedule on his laptop, and decided to say nothing. He said he was in town for a meeting and asked if he could stop by for an hour. I said yes. Evelyn made tea. He sat at the kitchen table and talked about New York and his channel and the neighborhood where he had found a new apartment, and at some point near the end of the visit, he reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. "You just retired," he said. "You should have your paperwork in order. This is a standard medical authorization. If something happens to you and you can't speak for yourself, it gives me the authority to make decisions on your behalf. Every financial advisor recommends it." He slid it across the table with the ease of someone presenting something routine. "I already had a notary come by the office this morning. She can come here if you want, or I can take it back and have it filed." I had looked at the document. The cover page said, "Medical Authorization and Emergency Directive." I had read the first paragraph, which described the purpose in language that matched what Brandon had said. I had signed it. The notary, a woman Brandon introduced as a colleague, had witnessed the signature and applied her seal. Brandon had taken the document, folded it back into his jacket, and 20 minutes later, he was gone. I had not thought about it again until Frank asked his question. I pulled into the driveway, went upstairs, and opened the filing cabinet in my study. I found my copy of the document in the third folder from the front where Brandon had told me to keep it. I sat down at my desk and read it properly this time. All 4 pages, every paragraph. By the 3rd page, my hands had started to shake. It was not a medical authorization. It was a durable power of attorney, a legal instrument that under California law granted the named agent broad authority to manage the principal's financial affairs, access bank accounts, make investment decisions, and conduct real estate transactions, including the sale of property. The named agent was Brandon Daniel Hayes. The principal was Walter James Hayes. The property at stake included by legal description on page 4, the house on Mariposa Street. He had not used it. There were no transactions I could find, no accounts accessed, no papers filed against the house. But for 6 weeks from the day I signed it in October to this moment in November, Brandon had held the legal authority to sell my house, empty my accounts, and make every financial decision of my life without my knowledge or consent. I sat at my desk for a long time, with the document in my hands, and the lamp making a small yellow circle on the desktop around me, and the rest of the room in dark. Then I called Frank. He answered on the 2nd ring. I told him what I had found. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said in the same level voice he always used, "Bring it to me tomorrow morning, first thing." The next morning, Frank read through the document at his desk while I sat across from him and watched the November light come through the blinds. He read every page with the careful, complete attention he gave everything, and when he finished, he set it down and looked at me. "This is a durable power of attorney with financial provisions," he said. "The cover page misrepresents its contents. That misrepresentation combined with the circumstances under which you signed it constitutes fraudulent inducement." He picked up his pen. "Under California Probate Code 4151, you have the unconditional right to revoke this instrument at any time while you retain legal capacity. I'm going to prepare a revocation document today. Once you sign it and it's notarized, the POA becomes void and unenforceable immediately." "How long will that take?" I asked. I'll have it ready this afternoon, Frank said. He set the pen down and looked at me directly. Walter, he never used it, but I want you to understand what this instrument represented. For 6 weeks he had the legal authority to do whatever he chose with everything you own. He paused. That is not a son protecting his father. That is something else entirely. I looked at the document lying on Frank's desk. I thought about the kitchen table in October, the tea Evelyn had made, the easy, practiced way Brandon had slid the paper across the table like it was nothing. My chest hurt with a specific interior pain that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with it. Prepare the revocation, I said. That afternoon I signed it in front of Frank's notary. The durable power of attorney that Brandon Hayes had placed over my life on a Tuesday evening in October became at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Wednesday in November, a piece of paper with no legal weight whatsoever. I drove home. Evelyn was in the kitchen. She looked up when I came in and read something in my face that made her set down what she was holding. Walter, she said. What happened? I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Brandon had slid the document across to me 6 weeks ago, and I told her everything. Not just about the POA, everything. From the production schedule I had found on his laptop, to Claire's phone call to the folder that was nearly an inch thick on the corner of my desk. Evelyn listened without moving. Her hands were flat on the table in front of her. When I finished, she looked at her hands for a moment, and then looked up at me, and her eyes were bright and full and determined in a way that made my throat close completely. Does he still have anything? She asked. Legally, anything at all? No, I said, not anymore. She nodded. She reached across the table and covered my hands with hers, and the warmth of that, the plain, solid warmth of her hands on mine. At that kitchen table was the first thing in 6 weeks that had made me feel like the ground under my feet was still there. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, read the screen, and held it out to me without a word, her jaw tight and her eyes gone hard in a way I had not seen before. A new email, anonymous sender, 4 words in the subject line. He'll leave you too. Evelyn did not put the phone down immediately. She looked at the screen for a moment longer than necessary. The way you look at something when you are deciding whether to be surprised by it, or whether you were always somewhere underneath everything waiting for it to arrive. Then she set the phone on the table and looked at me, and the expression on her face cracked open in a way I had not seen before. Not collapse. Evelyn did not collapse. But the careful composure she had been maintaining since the night Brandon played that video in our living room developed a fracture that went all the way through, and what came through it was not anger and not grief, but something rawer than either. The expression of a woman who has been carrying something alone for a very long time and has just run out of the particular kind of strength that carrying alone requires. That's not the first one, she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. They had come up from the table and were pressed together in front of her chest, the knuckles pale and tight, the way hands press together when a person is trying to hold themselves in one piece through sheer physical effort. How long? I asked. Since the week after the wedding, she said. September, 3 days after we came home from the church. The number landed in my chest like something dropped from a height. 3 days? We had been married for 72 hours when the first one arrived. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. She looked at me directly. Her eyes were full, but she was not going to cry. Yet I could see her deciding that the conscious choice to hold it together for just a little longer. Because I didn't know who was sending them, she said. I suspected. But suspecting your husband's son of something like that without proof felt like... She stopped, pressed her hands tighter together. It felt like exactly the kind of thing he would want me to do. Start an accusation I couldn't back up. Give everyone a reason to say I was causing problems. I stood up and crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her, and she let me take her pressed together hands in mine and hold them until I felt the tension in her knuckles begin very slowly to release. Show me, I said. All of them. She showed me. There were 11 emails over 8 weeks, each one anonymous, each one designed to land in a specific place, the grief I still carried for Linda. The uncertainty that comes with any new marriage, the particular vulnerability of a woman who has started over and is not entirely sure she deserves to. Your husband still talks to his dead wife every night. You're not what he really wanted. You were just available. He'll leave you too. I read every one of them at the kitchen table with Evelyn beside me, and my jaw so tight, the muscles along it ached from the effort of not letting what I felt show on my face in a way that would frighten her. The next morning, I called Frank. He listened, then said he knew a digital forensics consultant in Pasadena who worked with his firm on cases involving electronic evidence. He would make the call. 4 days later, the consultant's report came back. The metadata embedded in an image file attached to the third email contained device information registered to a user account in Manhattan, New York. The account name partially visible in the embedded data began with the letters B and H. Frank called me with the results. His voice was the same as always, level, unhurried, but underneath it so slight I almost missed it was the particular quality of a man who had seen a great deal and was still capable of being affected by what he saw. "It's enough," he said. "Combined with everything else in that folder, Walter, it is more than enough." I thanked him and ended the call. I went to find Evelyn. She was in the garden kneeling in the dirt beside the rosemary she had planted in October, pulling up the dead growth from the edges to make room for what was still living underneath. Her hands were dirty, and her hair was coming loose from where she had pinned it, and she looked in that moment more herself than I had seen her look in weeks, purposeful and grounded and entirely present in what she was doing. I crouched down beside her. "Frank's consultant confirmed it," I said. "The emails came from Brandon." She sat back on her heels and looked at the rosemary for a moment. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were clear now, fully clear, the brightness in them. No longer the brightness of held-back tears, but something harder and cleaner than that. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at her hands in the dirt at the rosemary she was tending at the garden she had made along the back fence of my house that was now our house. "Now," I said, "we finish it." The second video went up on a Tuesday morning. I found out the way I found out most things involving Brandon's channel, not by watching it myself, but by the phone starting to ring before I had finished my first cup of coffee. Ray called at 7:41. Frank called at 8:03. By 8:30, I had 17 text messages from numbers I did not recognize, and I understood, without opening a single one of them, what the general direction of the morning was going to be. The title of the video was "My Dad Chose a Stranger Over His Own Son, Here's the Truth." It ran for 11 minutes and 40 seconds. I watched it once alone in the study with the door closed because I did not want Evelyn to see my face while I watched it. Brandon had taken fragments of real things and assembled them into something that was not real at all. A voicemail I had left him in August before the wedding, asking him to please come, that it would mean everything to me, edited so that the first half was cut, leaving only my voice saying, "It would mean everything to me," stripped of its context and placed over footage of Evelyn at the welcome dinner, smiling at something Samantha had said. A phone call from 2 years ago when I had told Brandon that I was proud of what he had built, repurposed now, to make it sound like I was praising the channel that had destroyed our family. Old photographs of Brandon as a boy standing with me at job sites, sitting on my shoulders, at a 4th of July parade in Old Pasadena that he had attended when he was 6 years old. The narrative Brandon built around these fragments was of a father who had been manipulated away from his son by a woman who had arrived at exactly the right moment of loneliness and vulnerability. He did not say Evelyn's name. He did not have to. The implication was precise and deliberate, and designed to survive the kind of casual viewing that does not ask too many questions. 2 million views in 48 hours. I called Frank at 9 o'clock. "I have seen it," Frank said before I could speak. The edited voicemail alone constitutes defamation per se. Under California law, it presents a false impression of fact, not opinion, and it was constructed deliberately from material he knew to be misleading when taken out of context. His pen moved against paper on his end of the line. "This strengthens our filing considerably. I want to move by Monday." "Move?" I said. I put the phone down and sat at the desk for a moment. Outside the study window, the December light was thin and flat. The kind of light that gives everything the quality of a photograph taken the day after something happened rather than during it. My phone buzzed. Ray. "Walter." His voice had the particular quality it got when he was delivering information he had been sitting on and was now ready to put down. "The man from the video, Marcus Webb. He called me this morning. He says Brandon owes him money, half the contracted rate unpaid since the video went sideways. He says he has a signed contract and he wants to talk." Something shifted in my chest. Not surprise. Something closer to the feeling you get when a circuit you have been tracing finally reveals its source, the small, specific satisfaction of a fault made visible. "Tell him, Wednesday morning," I said. "Silver Lake. I'll bring Frank." The coffee shop on Sunset Boulevard in Silver Lake was the kind of place that opened at 6 in the morning and had a chalkboard menu and exposed brick walls and took itself seriously in the way that Los Angeles coffee shops tend to take themselves seriously. Frank and I arrived at 10 minutes to 8 and took a corner table near the window with our backs to the wall and a clear line to the door. Frank set his briefcase on the chair beside him. I set the blue folder on the table. At 8 o'clock exactly, Marcus Webb walked in. He looked different from the man I had watched through a parking structure windshield in October, smaller somehow. The gray suit was gone, he was wearing jeans and a dark jacket, and the professional ease he had carried into the Pasadena Civic Auditorium had been replaced by something considerably less composed. He spotted us cross the room and sat down across the table without shaking hands, which told me he had decided in advance that this was not that kind of meeting. He ordered coffee when the server came. He wrapped both hands around the cup when it arrived and looked at the table for a moment before he looked at us. "I want to say something before we start," he said. His voice was lower than I remembered it. I knew it was wrong when I took the job. I told myself it was just acting, that the situation was controlled, that nobody was going to get hurt. He looked at me directly. I was wrong about that last part, and I'm sorry. I looked at him across the table and thought about Evelyn standing in front of blues and burnt oranges with her head tilted to the right, completely unaware that this man was walking toward her, with a script in his pocket and a camera hidden in his lapel. "Tell me about the contract," I said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a folded document. He set it on the table and pushed it toward Frank, who opened it without hurrying and began to read. The contract was 4 pages. It was printed on BH Content LLC letterhead, signed at the bottom of each page by Brandon Hayes in his full legal signature, and countersigned by Marcus Webb on the date of execution. The scope of work was described in language that left no ambiguity. Marcus was engaged to portray a wealthy businessman and initiate a romantic temptation scenario, targeting, and here the contract used her full name, Evelyn Carter Hayes, at a location to be confirmed by the production team. Her full name, in a legal document signed by my son. Frank had read to the end of the 4th page, set it down, and looked at Marcus. "You said he owes you money," Frank said. "Half the rate," Marcus said. "We agreed on a flat fee. He paid the first half before the shoot and told me the second half would come after the video posted. When the video got the wrong kind of attention, he stopped returning my calls." His jaw tightened. "I've done a lot of work I'm not proud of, but I've never been stiffed on a contract before." "How many productions like this have you worked on for BH Content?" Frank asked. Marcus looked at his coffee cup. 4, he said. "Over 2 years, different families, different setups, always the same basic structure, find the target build. The scenario, film, the reaction." "Did any of them consent to being filmed?" Frank asked. "No," Marcus said. Frank made a note. Then he looked up. "Mr. Webb, would you be willing to provide a formal statement to that effect and to authenticate this contract as part of a civil proceeding?" Marcus looked at me when he answered, not at Frank. "Yes," he said. "I would." Frank reached into his briefcase and produced a document of his own, a witness agreement already prepared, which told me he had been expecting this answer, or something close to it. While Marcus read through it, Frank leaned toward me slightly and said, in a voice low enough that it did not carry past our table, "This contract, combined with the recordings and the digital forensics report, constitutes a complete evidentiary package. We have fraudulent misrepresentation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and with the second video, defamation. I can file Monday morning." I looked at the contract lying on the table, at Evelyn's full name printed in black ink on BH Content LLC letterhead. I thought about her hands pressed together in the kitchen knuckles, pale the night she told me about the emails. I thought about the rosemary she had planted along the back fence. I thought about a boy who used to stand on a job site and ask me how I always knew which wire was which. "File it," I said. Marcus signed the witness agreement. Frank countersigned as notary of record. We shook hands at the door. Marcus's grip was firm, and his eyes were direct, the handshake of a man who has done something he is not proud of and is trying to begin, in whatever small way is available to him, to do better. I watched him walk down Sunset Boulevard and disappear into the Silver Lake morning. Then I turned to Frank. "Monday," I said. "Monday?" he said. I wore the white shirt. the same one I had worn to job sites for 35 years, plain cotton button-down collar, the kind of shirt that does not announce itself, but holds up through a long day without complaint. Evelyn saw me come downstairs in it and did not say anything about the shirt itself. She just handed me a travel cup of coffee and said, "Come home for lunch." "I will," I said. Frank met me on the steps of Los Angeles Superior Court on Temple Street at 9 o'clock. The building was everything courthouse buildings in California tend to be: large and indifferent, and entirely unconcerned with the particular weight any individual brings through its doors. Frank was already there when I arrived, briefcase in hand, the blue folder tucked under his arm. We filed at 9:23. The civil complaint named Brandon Daniel Hayes and BH Content LLC as defendants. The causes of action were for violation of California Penal Code 632 for the unauthorized recording of Evelyn Carter Hayes at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, defamation arising from the second video's deliberate misrepresentation of material facts, intentional infliction of emotional distress arising from the sustained campaign of anonymous emails targeting Evelyn, and fraudulent misrepresentation arising from the durable power of attorney obtained through deception. Frank handed the clerk the filing. The clerk stamped it. The case was assigned a number. We walked back out into the December morning. On the courthouse steps, Frank shook my hand and said, "The legal removal request goes to YouTube this afternoon. Based on the privacy violation documentation we're submitting, I expect the video to come down within 10 business days. The monetization restriction may come faster." "And the second video?" I asked. "That one is more complex because it involves edited public statements rather than unauthorized recording," Frank said. "But the witness agreement from Marcus Webb and the original audio files you preserved give us strong grounds for a companion request. I'll file it simultaneously." I nodded. I looked out at Temple Street at the December traffic moving past the courthouse, in both directions, indifferent and ordinary, and entirely normal. "Thank you, Frank," I said. He nodded, once picked up his briefcase and walked toward the parking structure. I stood on the steps for another minute, holding my travel cup, feeling the cold December air on my face, thinking about nothing in particular and everything at once. I called Evelyn from the car. She answered on the second ring. "It's done," I said. There was a pause that lasted exactly long enough for her to take one full breath and release it. "Come home," she said. "I meant it about lunch." I drove home on the 110, which was moving well for a Monday morning, and when I pulled onto Mariposa Street, I saw Samantha's car parked in front of the house. She was sitting on the front porch steps with her phone in both hands and her thumbs moving quickly across the screen, the focused, deliberate expression of someone choosing words carefully. I sat in the driveway for a moment and watched her through the windshield. She looked up, saw me, and held the phone out toward me so I could see the screen from where I was sitting. She had posted a photograph, Walter and Evelyn at the kitchen table, on a Sunday morning 3 weeks ago. 2 coffee cups and the morning light coming through the window, and Evelyn laughing at something just out of frame, her head tipped back, her whole face open. The caption read, "Some love stories don't need a test to prove they're real." She had posted it 40 minutes ago. It had been shared 412 times. I got out of the car and walked up the porch steps and sat down beside her. "Mom's making grilled cheese," she said, without looking up from the phone. "Good," I said. We sat on the porch together in the December cold, while the number in the corner of her post kept climbing, 465, 112, 640. And I thought about all the people on the other side of that number, who had looked at a photograph of my wife laughing at a kitchen table and had recognized something in it that was worth passing on to someone else. I did not know any of those people, but I was grateful for every single one of them. That evening at 7:44, my phone rang. A New York number I did not recognize. I answered. The voice on the other end was quieter than I had heard it in months. Stripped of its confidence and its performance and its careful calibration, it sounded very much like the voice of a boy who used to fall asleep on the couch with his shoes still on. "Dad," Brandon said, "can we talk? Just us. No lawyers, no cameras." I arrived at Huntington Gardens at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning and sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes before I got out of the car. Not because I was afraid. I had not been afraid of Brandon in a long time. I sat there because I wanted to be certain before I walked through those gates of what I was walking in to do. Not to win, not to deliver a verdict, not to close a door or open one or do anything other than listen to my son and tell him the truth which was the one thing I had always tried to give him, and the one thing I was beginning to understand that he had never quite known how to receive. The gardens were quiet on a Thursday morning in December. The rose garden was past its season, the bushes cut back to bare canes, but the walking paths were still and green, and the air had the particular quality of a place that has been tended for a long time by people who believed that tending mattered. I found Brandon on the bench beside the lily pond, the same bench where I had photographed him on his 8th birthday with a chocolate ice cream cone and a gap where his 2 front teeth had been. He was sitting with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped between them, looking at the water. He looked up when he heard my footsteps on the gravel path. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. The careful grooming was still there, but it was doing less work than usual, and underneath it I could see the face of someone who had spent several days in a room with the consequences of their own decisions, and had not enjoyed the company. I sat down beside him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Not the forbidden silence we were both breathing and present, and working each in our own way toward the thing that needed to be said. Brandon spoke first. "I don't know how to start," he said. "Start wherever it's true," I said. He looked at the lily pond. A bird landed on the far edge and then left again. His jaw worked for a moment, and then he said, "When Mom died, I was standing outside her room. I could hear the machines through the door, and I couldn't make myself go in. I kept thinking I'd go in when I was ready, and then she was gone, and I never—" His voice broke cleanly in half, and he stopped and pressed the back of his hand against his mouth and held it there until he had rebuilt enough of himself to continue. "I never said goodbye to her, and I have been trying to fix that ever since in every wrong way I can think of." I did not say anything. I let it sit between us the way it needed to sit. "I saw you with Evelyn," he said, "and you looked the way you used to look at Mom, and it felt like—" He stopped again. His hands had come apart, and he was pressing them flat against his thighs now, the way you press something down when it keeps trying to rise. It felt like Mom was being replaced, like if you could look at someone else that way, maybe it had never meant what I thought it meant. "Brandon," I said. "I know," he said. "I know that's not how it works. I know that now. I'm not sure I knew it then." I looked at my son sitting beside me on a bench in the rose garden, where I had photographed him on his 8th birthday, and I felt something move through my chest that was equal parts love and grief, and the particular exhaustion that comes from watching someone you love cause damage that could have been avoided if they had only been able to ask for help instead of reaching for control. "I've been seeing someone," Brandon said, "a therapist, in New York, 3 times a week." He looked at me. "She says I've been running a grief response that looks like everything except grief." "That sounds right," I said. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, not to Evelyn as a concept, to Evelyn as a person." His voice dropped. "I understand what I did to her." I looked at the lily pond for a long moment. Sonopy said, "I have been waiting 2 years to hear you say something true, and that was true, and I'm glad you said it." I turned and looked at him directly. "But I need you to hear something true from me as well. Fear doesn't give you the right to destroy people. Not me, not Evelyn, not Claire Donovan, who lost her job, or any of the other people whose lives you ran your productions through." I held his eyes. "Understanding something is not the same as repairing it. The understanding is the beginning. The repair is the work." Brandon looked at the water. "Will she ever—" he started. "That," I said, "is not your question to ask me. That is her answer to give, if she chooses to give it." He nodded, a small fractured nod, the nod of someone accepting a boundary they know is right, even though it costs them something to accept it. We sat for a while longer. The December garden was quiet around us. A couple walked past on the path behind the bench, speaking to each other in low voices, and then they were gone, and it was just the 2 of us again, beside the lily pond that Brandon had once tried to catch a frog in when he was 4 years old, and I had told him frogs were faster than they looked. Eventually I stood up. Brandon stood too. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face since he was very young, open and uncertain, and undefended in the way that faces are before the world teaches them to be otherwise. He held out his hand. I looked at it for a moment, then I pulled him into a hug that he was not expecting, and I felt him go very still against my shoulder the way he used to go. Still when he was small and had been frightened by something and needed to be held until the frightened part of him believed it was over. It was not over. We both knew that. There was a legal process still running, and a woman at home who had earned the right to her own answer in her own time, and the road between where we were standing and anything that might be called repair was long and uncertain and would require more from Brandon than he had ever been asked to give. But he was my son, and I was still his father, and sometimes that has to be enough to start with. I stepped back and looked at him. "Go home, Brandon," I said. "Keep seeing your therapist, and when the time is right, not when you're ready, because you'll never feel ready, find a way to say what you need to say to Evelyn, not for her to forgive you, just because she deserves to hear it." He swallowed hard. His eyes were wet, but he was not going to cry here, which I understood. "Okay," he said. I turned and walked back down the gravel path, toward the parking lot, through the quiet December garden, past the bare rose canes, and the green walking paths, and the air that smelled of winter earth, and something older than any of us. Behind me I heard Brandon sit back down on the bench. I did not look back. Evelyn was on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway. She had a cup of tea and a paperback book and the particular quality of stillness that meant she had not been reading. She had been sitting with the book as a reason to be outside watching the street waiting, without wanting to appear to be waiting. I got out of the car and walked up the porch steps and sat down in the chair beside her. She looked at me the way she had been looking at me for 3 months now, with the careful, complete attention of a woman who had decided that whatever was coming, she was going to meet it fully and without flinching. "How is he?" she asked. The question surprised me. Not that she asked it. Evelyn had never been small enough to pretend she did not care about the answer to a question like that, but the steadiness with which she asked it, no edge to it, no performance of indifference, just a genuine question from a woman who had been hurt by someone and still wanted to know how that someone was doing. "He's broken in some ways that have needed breaking for a long time," I said, "and he's starting to understand that." She nodded. She set her tea down on the small table between our chairs and looked out at Mariposa Street at the December afternoon light, going gold across the pavement. "I don't hate him, Walter," she said. "I want you to know that. I've thought about it a great deal, and I don't hate him." She paused. "I feel something closer to sorrow, the kind you feel for a person who has caused a great deal of damage because they didn't know how to ask for help with the thing that was actually hurting them." My throat closed around something I could not immediately name. "You're a better person than most," I said. She picked up her tea again. "No," she said simply. "I've just been through enough to know that carrying hatred is a weight I don't have the time or the interest to carry." She looked at me. "That doesn't mean I'm ready to see him. It doesn't mean I've forgiven him. It just means I've decided not to let what he did determine how I spend the rest of my life." Samantha arrived at 4 o'clock, as she had been arriving most afternoons since the night of the dinner, not because anyone asked her to, but because she had decided that this was where she needed to be, and Samantha, once she decided something did not require additional invitation. She sat on the porch steps and listened, while I told both of them about Huntington Gardens. She listened with her elbows on her knees and her chin in her hands, the focused, unmoving attention of a young woman taking in information she intended to think about carefully before she responded to it. When I finished, she said, "Did he cry?" "Almost," I said. She looked at the porch floor for a moment. Then she said, "Good," in a voice that was not cruel, just honest. The honest good of someone who needed to know that a person had been brought to the edge of the thing they needed to feel, even if they hadn't quite gotten there yet. The settlement negotiations took 2 weeks. Frank had told me in advance that Brandon would push back on at least one clause, and Brandon did he wanted to retain the right to discuss the situation, in general terms, on his channel framed as a personal growth narrative. Frank declined that clause without discussion and sent the revised document back within the hour. Brandon's attorney called Frank 3 times over the course of the 2 weeks. Each time Frank listened, made notes, and held every term. On the 23rd of December, Brandon signed. The agreement required him to permanently delete both videos and all associated content, to refrain from publishing any material referencing Walter, Evelyn, or Samantha in any context, and to pay a settlement sum to Evelyn directly, an amount that Frank had calculated based on documented emotional distress, lost income, during the period when Evelyn had reduced her volunteer work due to the anxiety the emails had caused, and the cost of the digital forensics consultation. Brandon's channel lost 387,000 subscribers between the night of the dinner party and the day the settlement was signed. I did not feel satisfaction about that number. I felt something more complicated, the specific adult sorrow of watching a consequence arrive that was entirely deserved and entirely painful and entirely the result of choices that did not have to be made. The night after the settlement was signed, I sat at the kitchen table after Evelyn had gone to bed, and I looked at the blue folder on the corner of the desk. It was still thick. All the documents were still in it. The recordings, the screenshots, Claire's messages, Marcus Webb's contract, the POA revocation, the forensics report, the settlement agreement. I picked it up. I held it for a moment. Then I put it in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet behind the insurance files and closed the drawer. Not because it was over. It was not entirely over. Healing does not work on the schedule that legal processes do, and Evelyn would carry what she carried for as long as she needed to carry it, and I would be beside her for all of it. But the folder belonged in a drawer now, not on a desk, not in my hands. It had done its work. 3 weeks after the settlement was signed, I went out to the front porch to collect the mail on a quiet January morning, and in the stack of envelopes and catalogs and the gas bill, there was a single white envelope with no return address, and a New York postmark, and my name written on the front in handwriting I recognized before I had consciously identified it. I stood on the porch in the January cold and looked at it for a long moment. Then I took the rest of the mail inside, set it on the counter, and carried the white envelope to my study. I sat down at my desk. I held the envelope in both hands, and I thought about a boy who used to fall asleep on the couch with his shoes still on, who used to stand on a job site and ask me how I always knew which wire to follow, who had stood outside a hospital room door and could not make himself go through it, and had been paying for that moment in every wrong currency available to him for 5 years. Then I opened it. The letter was 3 pages written by hand on plain white paper, in the careful, slightly cramped handwriting that Brandon had developed in middle school and never entirely grown out of. I had not seen his handwriting in years. We lived in a world of texts and emails and voicemails, a world that had made the particular physical act of putting pen to paper feel like a declaration of intent, which I suppose it was. I read it slowly, twice. He began with Linda. He wrote about the night she died, not the version of it he had given me at Huntington Gardens, but a longer version more specific with the kind of detail that only comes out on paper when there is no one watching your face while you write it. He wrote about the sound the machines made through the door. He wrote about the nurse who had come out at 2 a.m. and looked at him in the hallway and understood without being told that he was the son who could not make himself go in, and who had said to him very quietly, "She knows you're here," and how he had held on to those 4 words for 5 years, because they were the only version of a goodbye he had been able to accept. He wrote, "I think I decided somewhere in that hallway that if I could just see things coming, if I could just test things before they happened and know the outcome in advance, I would never have to stand outside a door again and find out that the moment I was waiting to be ready for had already passed." He wrote about Evelyn. Not an apology, or not only an apology. He wrote about the specific morning weeks after the wedding, when he had been editing footage from an unrelated project and had seen in a clip he had not intended to review a moment he had captured without knowing it at the welcome dinner. Evelyn in the kitchen doorway watching Walter read something at the table with an expression on her face that Brandon wrote about in a single sentence. "She looked at you the way Mom used to look at you when you weren't paying attention, and I had to close the laptop because I couldn't breathe." He wrote, "I think I knew then that she was real, and I think that's when I stopped being able to stop what I had already started." He did not ask me to drop the settlement. It was signed. He knew that. He did not ask me to tell Evelyn anything on his behalf. He wrote, "If I ever say anything to her, it will be me saying it to her, not through you. You've carried enough." Near the end of the 3rd page, he wrote, "I have been seeing Dr. Patricia Ames on West 72nd Street 3 times a week since November. She is helping me understand the difference between watching over people and watching people. I did not know there was a difference until recently. I think I am beginning to." The last paragraph was short. He wrote, "I don't know what we are now, Dad. I don't know if what I broke can be fixed or if it just becomes something different, something that still exists but holds its shape differently than before. I'm not asking you to answer that. I'm just asking you to know that I'm working on becoming someone who deserves to find out." I sat at my desk for a long time after I finished reading. Then I opened the top drawer and took out a sheet of plain paper and a pen. I did not know exactly what I was going to write. I knew it would not be forgiveness, not in the clean and complete way the word is usually meant. I knew it would not be the closing of a door, either because the door was still there, and I was still his father, And those two facts did not stop being true because of everything that had happened between October and January. I wrote for 20 minutes. When I finished, I folded the paper, put it in an envelope, wrote Brandon's Manhattan address on the front, and set it on the corner of the desk to mail in the morning. Then I capped the pen and stood up. I walked down the hall and out through the kitchen and into the backyard where the January afternoon was thin and cold and very clear. Evelyn was kneeling beside the raised bed she had built along the back fence in November, turning the winter soil with a small trowel, preparing it for whatever she intended to plant in the spring. She had dirt on her hands and her hair was coming loose from where she had pinned it. And she did not look up when she heard the kitchen door, but the line of her shoulders changed a small, involuntary softening that I had learned over the past 16 months to recognize as the specific physical language of a woman who is glad you are there. Samantha was sitting on the back steps with a sketchbook open on her knees, drawing something I could not see from where I was standing. She looked up when I came out and raised her eyebrows in the question she had been asking, with her eyebrows since she was about 19 years old. "Good," I said. She accepted that and looked back down at her sketchbook. I pulled the old wooden chair from beside the door and carried it to where Evelyn was working and sat down beside her. She glanced up at me, reading my face the way she had been reading it since July of 2023 in a school parking lot with a paintbrush held at the wrong angle. "Tea," she said. "In a while," I said. She nodded and went back to her trowel and her winter soil. The January light was doing what January light in Pasadena does in the late afternoon, going soft and sideways and gold along the tops of things, catching the edges of the fence boards and the bare branches of the lemon tree in the corner and the silver in Evelyn's hair where it had come loose from its pin. I sat in the wooden chair beside my wife in our backyard on a January afternoon and listened to the sound of the trowel in the soil and Samantha's pencil moving across paper, and somewhere 2 streets over, a dog making its opinion known about something. And I thought about 35 years of following wires through walls and the thing that work had taught me above everything else. Every system has a source. Every fault has a cause. And if you are patient enough and careful enough and willing to stay with it long after the easier thing would be to walk away, you can find the place where something went wrong and understand it fully. Understanding it does not always mean fixing it. Sometimes it just means knowing. And sometimes, on a January afternoon, in a backyard in Pasadena, with your wife's hands in the winter soil, and your stepdaughter's pencil moving across paper, and the letter you just wrote sitting on the corner of your desk, waiting to be mailed, sometimes knowing is exactly enough. I spent 35 years following wires through dark walls. I thought I understood how systems fail. This family story taught me otherwise. The most dangerous damage does not blow a breaker. It happens quietly at dinner tables between people who are still smiling at each other. I was not a perfect father. I waited too long. I built a folder of evidence when I should have simply stood beside my wife and said, "I see what is happening, and I am not going anywhere. If you are living inside a family betrayal right now, do not wait until you have proof. Speak sooner, love louder. The folder should never have to exist." I believe God does not give us the people who are easy. He gives us the people who are necessary. Evelyn was necessary, and this family story, as painful as every chapter of it, was brought me to a January afternoon in a backyard in Pasadena with the right woman beside me and good soil under her hands. This family betrayal cost us all something real, but what we built on the other side of it was worth every difficult step. Do not be like me. Do not wait. If this story reached you somewhere true, leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling stories that matter. Thank you for being here until the very last word. The stories ahead contain fictional elements built for reflection and understanding. If this is not the content you are looking for today, step away, choose what serves you best, and take good care of yourself.